Well, did you want to do do you want to talk about the Prince thing for a cold open?
That could be a good cold open, I guess. Yeah.
All right, to fill me in. I have no idea what's going on.
So I don't think this is as much a like shitting on Netflix topic, but I guess you could, because they kind of wavered a little bit here. So apparently there was a 9-hour, I want to say it ended up being 9-hour documentary about Prince, his whole life.
Okay.
That was supposed to come out on Netflix. Like, this person, I don't know the name of the director, but this person like worked on it for 5 years and like found basically anyone who would talk to them. Not like anybody, but like, important people in Prince's life, collaborators, family, all that kind of shit. And I don't know if it was supposed to be released this year or next, but it was kind of like this big thing. And the Prince estate apparently shot it down.
Oh, okay.
Like,
okay.
5 years of work, 9 hours of documentary, just completely shelved.
That sucks.
Will probably never see the light of day. And it is pretty much all but confirmed that it's probably because it is a non-estate sanctioned documentary about Prince, which means there may be some things about him that are not super savory. Maybe, he was I do think he was like a complicated person. He's a very private person too. So there's probably a lot of things that like people just straight up like don't know about him. And so I think that shit would be interesting to see.
Interesting, yeah, sure, of course.
Because like,
we are layered human. We are layered people.
Yeah,
our species.
But yeah. From what I've learned about the Prince estate, though, it sounds like they're really only interested in like reissuing deluxe copies of Purple Rain every few years. Like I peruse the Prince subreddit. It's one of the few communities online that haven't totally poisoned me. Like usually, like whenever I get into something, I like impulsively, I'm like, oh, I should check out the subreddit, see if there's anything cool about it. And I learned time and time again that fandom is awful and bad, and like they are full of repugnant people that I don't want to be around.
1000%.
The Prince subreddit isn't too bad. It's not too bad. But it is funny every time that there's like a new like reissue that comes out and people are like, great, another like deluxe triple LP of Purple Rain. Like Prince has such a huge catalog of albums that just like have not been like reissued or remastered or like, deluxe version. Cause like, there's like a handful of like 90s albums, 2000s albums that like they're very bare bones. And it's like, I know that there's material from that time period for that stuff, but it's just like, no. We need to print money. So just only do the hits and the classics and never really like go beyond that. So whatever does eventually come out will probably be like very heavily sanitized, and it might allude to like struggles that Prince had, but it was just a huge bummer. And like,
yeah,
if you're someone at Netflix who has access to the masters, to the tapes, if you want to leak it, I will donate to the Kickstarter for your like legal fees that will inevitably come when the Prince estate comes for you, because Prince may be dead, but like the litigious nature of like Prince will live on through like the estate that will who've come after you.
Yeah, that bites.
And it just sucks. It sucks that that Netflix was just like, yeah, all right. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how that works. Like, I don't know if when it comes to stuff like that, like with the estates and stuff, I don't know what there is that they can do,
Right. Netflix finally had the opportunity to make an interesting documentary, and they shit their pants.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, for real. I didn't even think of that with like their usual slop. That's the real Netflix slop, is their documentaries that all feel like AI generated or whatever.
Oh, God, for sure.
So bad.
It's like there was like 2 sentences added to the Wikipedia article about this famous murder case. So like we need to add like 2 more episodes to expand on these 2 sentences of like a slight breakthrough that happened, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, that seems like it would be like a pretty like big for them too, you know? A kind of like a tell-all, like long-form Prince documentary. People love Prince, you know?
Yeah, and it's like, from what I gathered, I don't even think like the person that was making it, I don't think it was designed to be like an
attack piece. It's just probably just
we're finally canceling Prince like 9 years after he's dead.
Yeah. Like, it's just a rounded, you know, I'm trying to think, it's more objective, I guess. Not trying to be like, one way or the other. Which is cool. It'd be cool if there was. That sounds way more interesting to me than, I don't know. Like, I was just listening to a podcast.
It's like, here's a bunch of talking heads that are just like, he was great, legendary musician, awesome to work with. He was so awesome.
1999.
Just roll B-roll footage of him performing in the 80s, 90s, wrap it up, and we're done.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say I just have this on the mind because I was just listening to a podcast where they were talking about apparently they kind of did that with the Pharrell doc biopic. I don't know exactly the Lego one. Have you heard of that? Piece by Piece. It's like it's either a documentary or biopic or something. Done in Lego form, but apparently that's like really like it's almost like it sounds like they almost use the Lego format as an excuse to like gloss over the more like iffy subject matter, because they can just use the excuse of like, well, it's Legos, it's for kids, we can't talk about all that bad stuff.
They recreate the Blurred Lines music video with minifigs.
That was one of the things like specifically mentioned, was that they just didn't. I don't know, kind of.
Well, then you can do you can do a little tie-in. You know how many like pervs would buy like a anatomical Emily Ratajkowski Lego minifig?
Yeah, no, that'd be. What would it be? I mean, we should still have this little square Lego body, I guess. It's just they detail it exactly like how it would be if.
Yeah, there's 2 different versions because there's like the censored one and then there's like the uncensored one.
Yeah, and then they have the like Robin Thicke Bionicle to go with it. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of ThereWillBeDuds. This is episode 173, and I am your co-host, TJ, and with me as always,
I am Nick.
And as always, we watched a movie. That movie, I'm stalling because I didn't look up the thing and needed to remind myself what year this came out. That movie is The Last Temptation of Christ from 1988, directed by Martin Scorsese. Damn it! I told myself that I was going to say that right, and I fucked it up. Scorsese. It is a sort of retelling of the last days of Jesus Christ, of the Bible fame. He begins the movie kind of questioning his faith and questioning his position as like the Messiah and the Son of God, and then he kind of comes to accept it, and then he goes up on the cross, and then it's mostly the Bible but with some creative liberties. Yeah, it's a Scorsese movie. Paul Schrader. It's very in their, this is almost the most literal God's Lonely Man of Paul Schrader's career.
That was my first thought, was like, this is the loneliest man of all time.
But yeah, it's a lesser, I don't know if I'd say one of Scorsese's lesser known, but probably lesser seen, you know. I feel like people know more about this one than like Kundun or something, but yeah. I think this is one that for a while would be like considered lesser Scorsese. Mm-hmm. And then I think has had sort of a like critical reevaluation for like the letterboxed era of people. Same with like After Hours. Like they both got like Criterion releases, and then I think like a new generation of people have like come around to these movies, and this one in particular. And I mean, Willem Dafoe, he's like also very like hot right now. Yeah, like I think people are. I could have just stopped it there. Willem Dafoe is very hot. But you know, this was a Criterion blind buy for me, where like I was like, it's Marty, it's Paul Schrader, it's Willem Dafoe, it's one of his that I haven't seen. So I picked it up, I think, during one of the 50% off sales, and so I'm glad that I finally got to watch it. But I was reading the little insert about it, and it makes sense as I was reading it, but like people were not happy that this movie came out. That's what I was gonna say. I think that also plays a big part in like its legacy and why it wasn't like as, you know, well remembered as his other stuff, because at the time, you can continue, but it's dumb. Cause I think all the controversial stuff is dumb.
It's and the booklet makes sure to note that all of like the religious groups that were protesting it and were, you know, there's like a theater in France that got like burned down. Like one person died. Like it was kind of like a global thing, like all over the place. People were upset about this.
I didn't know about that.
A lot of them had never seen the movie, just straight up have not seen it.
Of course.
And it's like you watch it and it's like I know what they found objectionable. It's like the sort of thought, the relationship with Jesus and Mary Magdalene. It's like that speculative, like, oh, Jesus was a man. Did he have like those kinds of desires?
Kids, and then
and like we're jumping ahead to the end there, but like the end kind of speculates like what could have been, and Jesus kind of sees a vision of what it could be. And I don't know. It all seemed pretty tame. I mean, you see, there's like frontal nudity, like you see Mary Magdalene.
I mean, there's plenty of tits, but as far as like with Jesus, it's pretty tame. Yeah. And like half the time, like where there's tits, it's not even like sexual. Like there's that scene where they're all like kind of in the river when he meets John the Baptist. and there's like the few like female extras that are topless in that scene are just standing in the river going, just like shaking their heads. Like it's more like it's like a tribal thing. It's not even like ooh, sexy boobies, ooh, you know. So I was like kind of shocked at how tame the whole thing really was. And it's like at the end of the movie, he makes the right decision and he dies on the cross. Like, what are you mad about? What are you mad about? It's because like I feel like Christians, like, they preach media illiteracy for their followers. Like, it's like you're not allowed to have any like nuance when you talk about the Bible and when you talk about Jesus Christ. It's like, nope, he's God, he's infallible, he's perfect. He's just this, you know, this dude who came to Earth and he did what he was supposed to, and then he died, and he's, you know, no question. But that is literally, that's like why this movie stuck with me the first time I watched it, is like, because that's like my favorite stuff about it, is that like, even when I watched it in high school, maybe I was still, maybe I don't know. I feel like, I don't know exactly when I kind of transitioned out of the faith or whatever, but it was, I was watching it somewhere around there. I may have still been kind of somewhat, but now I'm not. But I remember, like, even at the time, I was like, it's such a, like, I think an elegant way to explain, like, his struggle. And it's like, it makes him so much more fucking relatable. It's like reading the Bible.
It's like very to the point.
It's fucking boring. The Bible is so boring because it's like, and Jesus in the Bible is
one
like the
star on Goodreads.
Yeah, he's like the most boring protagonist ever because he's just like I'm thinking of like Willem Dafoe versus any other Christ in like, a more Christian approved movie, and you just get the like, I'm soft spoken.
It's either like perfect person or like, pain pig.
Yeah, 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 exactly. But like, I'm a human. I find it a much more likable character and a much more interesting character if he seems human and he doesn't he seems like a fucking alien in other like media or like in the Bible. He doesn't seem. Yeah, it's really frustrating to me that like that's like the big issue is that like, oh, he lusts, he has these feelings of desire and then he has sex. And it's like, but that's being human. That's what Jesus was, right? He was sent to earth to live as a human. And like, I think it's so like cool that it starts and he's like, he's not even sure if he's the Messiah. He's like questioning God and stuff. And then, like you get to the end, and I do remember too, like the other reason this like stuck out to me when I was younger was the whole like the occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge ass ending, like totally took me by surprise. I was like, wow, that's so cool. It was like, that's what I mean. Like it's such an awesome way to eat. Like this is me speaking again as a non-religious person anymore, but I think that's such an awesome way to like show and like explain how he came to like accept his own sacrifice on the cross. Is like that long like 30-minute segment or like sidebar into like what his life would have been or whatever, and then he's like, no, fuck this, I want to die, and then he does or whatever, and that's cool. I think it's really cool, and I think it's a really cool way to show how it, how he could come to that, and
it hammers in how important that decision is, and like how he ultimately decides to make that sacrifice. Like, leave it to a bunch of like fundamentalist dipshit Christians in the 80s to protest one of the few like secular adaptations of their work that might sway someone to become a Christian because it presents like a human version of Christ that's like a relatable person that you could like see yourself as. Like, of course they're going to like naturally despise that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, I don't remember. I don't know how old you were. I guess you're like a couple years younger than me, but like, did you go see Passion of the Christ in theaters when that came out?
No, no, I didn't.
My parents took me to that in like 2004, and it was weird.
Yeah.
Because like they were both like crying the whole time, and I was just kind of sitting there just like, huh, okay. Because like there was so much. I feel like there was controversy around that movie only because it was so violent. Like that's what it was like, kind of like you're gonna see Jesus get the shit kicked out of him like you've never seen before.
Yeah.
And then it's like, it's probably, like in the actual Bible, it's like they whipped him, they beat him, they put the cross around him and made him carry it to the hill. They nailed his hands, and it's like you get 5 sentences for for the whole crucifixion process. And Mel Gibson turned it into like a 2-hour-long movie of Jim Caviezel just getting his shit rocked.
Yeah.
Apparently, it was also like super anti-Semitic. Like the Jews in that movie are like cartoon. Like they're not like the cartoon of like the big nose guy like grubbing his hands or whatever. But apparently, like the portrayal is not necessarily flattering in their favor. You know.
Yeah. Plus, that went hand in hand with Mel Gibson's like his real life, tirade.
Was that right when it began to spiral?
It was right around then.
Because he did that movie, he did like Apocalypto, and then I feel like he just fell off the map.
Yeah.
Was he one of those guys where like a voicemail got leaked and he was just like saying some wild shit, or did he like put statements out? I don't remember. I think I'm conflating him and like Alec Baldwin, because I remember like Alec Baldwin had some voicemails where he was like calling his daughter a fat pig or something.
Yeah. Yeah. I misconstrue those together too, because I'm pretty sure they were both just like really low quality videos, and they were both like hammered and just kind of like spouting off like
just weird shit.
No, he said, well,
say it verbatim.
Including a claim that the Jews are responsible for all the wars in the world.
Oh my god.
Gibson blurted out a barrage of anti-Semitic remarks about fucking Jews.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so stuff like that.
Well, hey,
and that was 2006, so it was like the year after, but that was before Apocalypto. So,
well, at least all of that is behind us now.
Yeah, so we can still enjoy Flight Risk. At
least there aren't any famous rappers putting out shirts with swastikas on them now.
Yeah.
But back to Last Temptation. Yes. I had this thought, I don't know how many years ago, because like you, I'm not particularly like religious anymore. I grew up in the church. I don't really have any like ill will towards like the church that I grew up in. Like I still see a lot of those families like fairly regularly, and they've always been like nice people to me. But I don't really buy into that stuff anymore. But like a couple years ago, I had this idea of just like, what if I read the Bible again, almost, but like as like a fantasy text, like Lord of the Rings or something like that. Yeah. Because Lord of the Rings, I haven't read them, but it's like I kind of see them similarly in sort of like these texts of like adventures and like morality and stories, and like there's wars and there's violence and there's bloodshed and there's like lessons to be learned. And I haven't done that because I think like the few times I have like tried to read the Bible, I started at Genesis like at the beginning, and I feel like there's like 3 pages of just like Adam who begets so and so who beget.
Yeah, there's
and I'm
a
just
lot of that shit.
I'm like,
well, it reads like God. An old a lot, like you go back far enough, and like a lot of old books are not like written that way, or like written like how we're used to like novels being written now.
Right.
And that's, I've never read it cover to cover, but I've read, plenty of stories. I read, like I went to a Christian school, so we read a lot like every day. It's like it doesn't really work as a book, so it would just, I think it would just be boring. There's some interesting, parables, but altogether it's pretty boring.
All that said, that's like part of the reason why I liked this movie was like it gave a fantasy tinge to like a story that I know pretty much. Like it's like, oh, when he stops them from throwing stones at Mary Magdalene.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like the let ye who has not sinned cast the first stone. I'm like, okay, yeah. I was Leo in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I was like, I know that one.
Yeah. Yeah, I watched it. I watched it with Kalia, who, you know, grew up in a not, you know, a heathen household. So,
did she not know some of those?
No, she. Well, that's what it was. Kind of fun. Like, I was like, "Hey, do you know what that is?" Or like, you know, not like everything, but or she'd have to like ask me something. I'd be like, "Oh yeah, that's this thing, or that's this guy, or whatever."
That's wild. To like, because I grew up in it, and you grew up in it. I'm so used to that just being like the dominant thing. That's stories that everybody knows.
Yeah, like,
so it's like when you meet someone that doesn't like.
Yeah, exactly.
You're like,
it's so weird.
That's.
And then you realize that, like, oh yeah, it's like
religious.
Yeah, that, and then like I wondered, like, not growing up in a religious household, how much more weird. Like, I think like religion is weird now, but like if I grew up in like a non-religious household, I'd like it's probably even more weird than I even like view it as, you know, because you know, I remember one in particular. She was like they reference the prophet Daniel, and she was like, Daniel, like. You know, it doesn't sound like a Bible name. And I was like, yeah, you don't know like Daniel and the Lion's Den? She's like, no. I was like, oh, okay. it's so that's what I mean. I was like, isn't that one of those things that like everybody knows? Because she knows some of this. Because when it got to the stone throwing scene with Skibbity, and she was like, he was like building up. He didn't actually say the phrase, you know, let you who has not sinned cast first stone, but he was more or less saying it. But she was like, say it.
Yeah.
He never said it. So like she knew that. She knows some of the stuff, but yeah.
It's so funny. We were getting near the tail end of the movie tonight. I finished it tonight. I started it yesterday. But
I did not remember it being this long. I thought it was like 2 hours.
Dude, yeah. Well, we got to like the crucifixion part, and I'm like, there's still like 40 minutes left.
Right? Isn't that such a I remember having that same feeling. The same.
And then he gets off the cross, and I'm like, this is uncharted territory.
Yeah, exactly. It's so cool. Like
I was like Rick and Morty. I was like, whoa, they're taking Jesus off the grid. But we get to that ending spot, and we see Harry Dean Stanton, who, man, I'm so glad we got to see him again. I thought he was only in that one scene earlier on, and I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. And then he shows up again, and I'm like, oh shit, there's my boy.
Yeah.
But like, I was watching that scene, and I was like, oh, Chloe, like Harry Dean Stanton's on the TV again, and she came out, and just because she went to like a Christian high school.
Okay.
And so as he's talking, Chloe's like, oh, he's from Damascus. That must be Saul. Literally the second line. He said, and God called out to me, Saul. And I was like, whoa. And then she's like, she goes off into the other room, and she's still kind of listening to him talk. And then she says something like, oh yeah. And then he does this, and he becomes Paul. Second line he says, I became Paul. And I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Like she just knew all that shit and rattled it off.
Yeah.
Cause like I know a lot of it, but I don't know like details like that. Like I couldn't tell you about like Damascus.
I know the story,
and,
with,
like
how Saul became Paul and stuff, and that was something where I'm just not going to explain that to her. It's not important. It's not very important to the movie. It just adds more shit that you don't need to know.
I did clock that little girl being the devil immediately, though. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but like, I was like, there's no way that like Scorsese's gonna like do a Tarantino before Tarantino and like alter the history of like the Bible, and like offer this alternate history where like Jesus like never was crucified.
I don't know, I thought maybe, like I said, that it surprised me the first time I saw it, but because I was just trying to think of like when I first watched it, I'm like, why is this so controversial? Why? And then obviously there's like the sex scene and stuff, but then I was like, oh, is that why? Because they like, he doesn't die on the cross or whatever. Then he does. So I'm like, oh, it's just that other stuff. Okay. All right.
They all like walked out of the theater. By then they never actually like
they never
got to the
it.
part where he goes back on the cross. They're like, this is blasphemous.
Yeah. It does hold a lot, but what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, I guess since we're kind of on this subject of like following the text or following the Bible or whatever, I feel like in my memory when I think of like how much I like the movie, I'm really thinking of like the first and third acts, because I will say, watching it this time, the second act where he is basically just like Bible Jesus, it's basically like after the desert. Trying to think. See, I'm trying to go deep with my Bible lore. I can almost remember the name of where he goes in the desert. So it's after he's in the desert up until like Palm Sunday, I guess.
Okay.
Where it's just like, it's mostly just like a string of scenes where he just does his miracles, you know. He goes to Lazarus and he raises him from the dead, and like,
right.
Oh, turns the water into wine, and like all those, you know, the famous Jesus miracles. It's that like middle chunk of like just like kind of scene after scene of that, where I felt like there wasn't much like progression in the story, but it was more just like, well, we're doing this Jesus stuff, we got to show the miracles and shit, you know. It's obligatory.
Right.
I feel like they could have just like, they had Peter Gabriel doing the score for this. They could have just done like a quick like 5-10 minute like montage set to like Sledgehammer or something. That would have been
cool. Speaking of the water to wine scene, of any scene from this movie, the only one that I have seen like in a vacuum is the classic Scorsese push in when Willem Dafoe like lifts up the glass of wine and gives that little smirk. I'm like, that's Marty. That's Marty right there. Like, I feel like in all of his movies, at some point in time, he has to have the camera like push in on a character. Because like, I saw like The Color of Money for the first time like last summer, and there were like so many shots. He like, that was probably his dream, like doing all these cool push-ins on like Paul Newman. But as soon as I saw that, I was like, yep, that's a classic Marty scene right there.
Yeah. I was thinking during that one, there was a couple other moments too. But like during that one, like how much of like a griefer that Jesus / God is. Like there's so many instances of like, he like does a miracle and then somebody like shows up and they're like, well, prove to me that you're God. Do a trick for us. Do something. And he's like, no, not now. He's like, maybe I'll do it later, but not right now. And then just the way that he did the water to wine scene, he's like, there's some wine right over there. And then he's like, no, that's water. And he's like, no, it's wine. And then he's like, I just checked it. I put it in there myself. And he's like,
thought about it that
check
way.
it again. He could, like, you'd think, like, I feel like how it is in the Bible is Jesus goes, he probably is like, you know, I have turned, you know, he says, like, I have turned this water into wine and it is blessed and whatever, which I also think is kind of funny that I didn't think until now, like seeing all the people like at a party, like drinking and stuff, that it's kind of funny that Jesus performs the miracle of turning like, you know, water, like life, like the, you know, the pure, like good drink into a vice. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, true. And probably at that point in time, like clean water was probably like a hot commodity. Like, everyone else is drinking like dirty ass, like still water from like a clay jar. And like, it's like, hey, you know that good water over there? It's wine now. That's such a good observation though. That like he'd be out in the desert and someone would be like, hey, my brother's like, he's a leper. Like, prove to me that you're God and heal him. And he's like, doesn't work that way, bro.
It's literally
and
like
then he's like having
a
party. Yeah.
It's like, I would do it, but since you asked, I'm not going to.
Yeah.
That's the attitude.
Yeah, and then just smash cut, and he's just like,
yeah.
just like super smug, like, yeah, I did that shit.
Yeah.
I did like, and I think this is around that time period in like the Bible Jesus stories in between the first and the third act. I did like the scenes where they were like overturning the tables in the temple, because I think of all of like the stories about Jesus in the Bible, I think like based socialist Jesus is like my favorite interpretation, because there are a lot of verses where you could like look at it and him talking about like, you know, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get into heaven. Like there's some like choice like verses about like economics and like greed and like wealth and all that kind of shit, and like that's the stuff that like resonates with me. And so like I've always liked those passages in the Bible where it's like it's anger, but it's like it's righteous anger, and it's like justified because you're angry over like a moral failing, right? Like the failing is like turning a place of worship into like a market, but still it's like commodification of the religion, turning it into an opportunity to you know, basically siphon what little money people have into the church and turning it into a business. And so of course mega pastors from the 80s were upset about this movie. Probably not about that scene in particular, but it's like I don't know how you're like Jim Bakker or Jimmy Swaggart or any of those like dickheads that will never die. I don't know how you continue to do what you do and sell like prepper buckets and like holy water, like vases of holy, like they all have a grift. They all have scams. Like, do you remember those like super deluxe videos with Vic Berger? Wasn't there like one of those mega church pastors that was like selling buckets that were like survivalist buckets? This was like 2015 or 2016. I don't think it was Jim Bakker. It might have been, but like they all have a grift, and they're all like, you know, like the one from like An Honest Liar, that guy that got caught.
Yeah, PD
Popov.
Yeah.
After that happened, he like transitioned immediately into like literally selling vials of holy water on infomercials. So it's like that the idea of like the Jesus that overturns the tables in the temple is like the fact that those guys just like, you know, well, we interpret those verses a little bit differently, and like the Lord loves a generous person, and it's like, you're so full of shit. So yeah, I do like angry socialist Jesus.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. There's plenty to like in the middle section too. I just meant like as far as like the main thing that I like about this being is like the sort of the human aspect of him. That's because that's like this is a good example of with both of those guys, because while might sound a little hypocritical because my favorite Scorsese movie is The Departed still, but like my favorite thing that like about both Scorsese and Schrader is the way that they like explore the human spirit, and I don't just mean in a religious sense. But like that's why I loved Mishima so much. I love that exploration of his character in that movie, or later on with like First Reformed, and Card Counter. Although that guy's a little less sympathetic. And then with Scorsese, there's another, like, it's kind of interesting. These guys both have more recently done movies about Christian priests, like, questioning their faith in a degree, because Schrader did First Reformed and then Scorsese did Silence. And also a really cool, just like character study of like a soul in torment or whatever. And I think that's really interesting, really cool. And I think these guys are, it's my favorite thing about both of them, like in their filmmaking that I like seeing. Well, like as far as like their directing, writing aspects or whatever. Yeah, I don't know.
Right.
And this is a good example of that because it's both of them working together, and it's kind of all about that. That's like the entire movie.
Yeah. Right. In like I said earlier, like you referenced like Schrader's like God's lonely man. This is like the quintessential lonely man.
Yeah.
And I do feel like that might be part of maybe part of that controversy too, is that like he's not as lonely in this one as like you said, he's like an alien in other movies, where it's like you feel like that sense of like brotherhood, especially like in his relationship with Judas, where I feel like growing up, it's just like, Judas betrayed him for
Judas is the bad guy. He's, and
it's just like, no, he was fulfilling like a role that he was supposed to fulfill, because it's like he's maybe the most important character, because like none of it works without him.
That's that is in the Bible too, and it's just a thing that people like gloss over. But like Jesus in the Bible tells Judas that, you will betray me.
Yeah.
And
I could not take Judas seriously because it was Harvey Keitel. It was good. It was still good. I still liked his performance, but here
the accent, like, the New York accent or whatever.
He just sounded like the wolf from Pulp Fiction, like coming to clean up a body. Just like, it's like, now Jesus, we gotta go do this. It's like, just throw Joe Pesci in there, throw Ray Liotta. Like, what are they up to?
That'd have been sick. All the apostles.
De Niro.
Yeah.
And like in the IMDb trivia, it did say that like Scorsese was like, he kind of liked the apostles having like that New York accent because he liked the idea of the apostles just like being some guys.
Oh, okay. Sure, yeah.
So I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, sure. The weirder part to me, like the accent, or like his voice wasn't as big of a sound to me. The weirder part was like, I couldn't understand why they gave him curly red hair, because I was like, I don't think he's a redhead, and I don't think he has curly hair either.
I wonder if it's maybe to differentiate him from everybody else a little bit.
Maybe, yeah.
Because
make him
some of the other apostles are just like
kind of blur together.
Dirt. They're like guy covered in dirt with curly black hair and a thick black beard.
Yeah.
Wearing like a toga or whatever. And it was like, some of those guys, I could not tell them all apart because they were all just sort of tall, muscular men with a similar hair and beard structure. Yeah,
the only one that I really kept separate was Peter, and I think that he was like the next biggest character.
Right. Right.
So yeah, it totally could have been. I really liked him in the last scene that you see of him where Jesus is like old and he walks in and he's like pissed off at him or whatever. I thought Harvey Keitel did really good there.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Remember what you told me. You took me in your arms. Do you remember? And you begged me, betray me. I have to be crucified. I have to be resurrected so I can save the world. I'm the lamb, you said. Death is the door. Judas, my brother, don't be afraid. Help me go through the door. And I loved you so much. I went and betrayed you.
Bowie shows up for a scene, and I love him in this, even though he is just in that one scene. I don't know, he's so fucking smooth, and like, he's like born to play like classical Roman official guy. Like that he just has the look, like the perfect look for it.
Yeah, he does. And he's a good actor too.
Yeah,
like I've only seen him in a handful of things, but it's like usually I feel like with people that aren't traditional actors, like musicians or like sports people, or just like it's always kind of like you're here for a cameo, and it's so people are like, oh, whoa, I recognize you, but it's never like, oh, you're gonna like be serious in acting, and like Bowie is like pretty good at it.
I feel like at least the ones that I've maybe seen him in something else, but the two that I think of with him are this and Prestige. And in both cases, it's like,
that's right.
These are both directors who aren't like it doesn't feel like stunt casting or anything. Like both roles, like Pontius Pilate in this and Nikola Tesla in that, it's like they both in both cases, it feels like the directors were probably like, I think that he's a good pick. He's a good choice for this role. Not, I want to have David Bowie in my movie because he's David Bowie sort of thing.
Oh yeah.
Because I think he fits both roles like very well.
Yeah.
He's like very well suited.
Firewalk with Me. That's the other one.
Oh
I've
yeah.
seen him in. Yeah.
Sure. I don't know. Yeah.
It's like a bit part at the beginning, but like
I guess
it's one of the most like iconic and memorable parts of that movie is like him disappearing or whatever.
Yeah. I was like, does that go into my category of like well casted? Like, I guess so, but it's weird, you know. His weird like Southern accent that he does in that, like,
oh my god, that's right.
But yeah, another one where like, like in the just growing up and knowing the stories from the Bible, it's like Pontius Pilate. Oh, he's the guy who condemned Jesus. He's evil. He's a bad, and like he's just like a guy, and he's he's not. He's still putting him to death but he makes it. I like how it's like very like cold and official, and he's just he's just talking to him for a little bit, and then he's like okay, we have to do this, right? And then I love what he says before he leaves. He's like,
you do understand what has to happen. We have a space for you up on Golgotha. 3,000 skulls there by now, probably more. I do wish you people would go out and count them sometime. Maybe you'd learn a lesson. No, probably not.
That's a good line. There was another good line that I liked near the end with Harry Dean Stanton, where like Jesus is kind of arguing with him a little bit because Harry Dean is like telling the story, even though it didn't technically happen. He's telling it how it should have happened. And so Jesus is like mad about it because he's like calling him a liar. He's like, no, that's not what happened. You're lying. Why are you telling people these lies? And then Harry Dean kind of follows him. And like at the end of the conversation, he says, I'm so glad that I met you so I can forget you now.
Yeah. Yeah, that was really good.
Damn.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's still kind of like, what do you think of it? That's like, oh, if he doesn't do this, he's basically like a loser, and he has like a family and he has a happy life, and yet it's like, no, you suck. You're a loser. You die. Yeah. You should just die. But I mean, technically, I guess in his eyes, it's like he did get to live a full life, and then he got to do the thing. So I guess that's cool.
Better than nothing, I guess.
Yeah. It's weird. I have to I was trying to explain it to Kalia after the movie because she still has had a lot of quibbles with the she said it was hilarious when early on in the movie they're talking about it's the apostles and they're like, oh well, he said this and this and this, and they're like, well, did you see it? And he's like, no. And he's like, well, then how do we know it's true? Because people believe it. And she thought that was hilarious because she thought it was kind of tearing into faith in general. And And I was like, maybe they were. Like, they're both Scorsese and Schrader are religious, or at least were like us and grew up religious. I don't know how much, but I think they still are. But they're able to, I think they're able to be more objective about it than, a lot of other Christians.
Yeah. Even if they're not particularly like still religious, it's like, so I don't know. I almost like respect it because it's like still something that like they're curious about in life, and like, whether you believe in like the more like dogmatic stuff or not.
Mm.
I mean, I think you can extrapolate a lot of questions about humanity through these lenses, regardless of if you're like religious or not, and you can get things out of this, whether you're religious or not. So I think that's, I don't know them personally, but like that seems to be like the angle that I sort of interpret it through. Well, they're not kind of like with this movie, they're not bashing you over the head with it, right? Like, again, all of these people that were upset about it when it came out, they're used to like Christian media where like it's just characters. Yeah, it's just characters like quoting Bible verses at each other, and then the end of the movie, like
shit.
Yeah, the moral of the story is just like it's essentially like a chick tract where like if you don't do this, you're going to hell.
Yeah.
Or like that one. God, is that Kirk Cameron at the end of it where he's like, "Hey Eric, Jesus man," and then it freeze frames on him.
I mean, Kirk Cameron is in a lot of like really Christian stuff. I don't know which one that's from though, but
yeah. Christian media is like not good.
No, it's not really.
It's like okay. It's like I would rather take if I was like a religious person, I would much rather take a incredibly humanizing and thoughtful look at the life of Jesus over like 2025.
Well,
but again, maybe if I in real life was
it's 2025 now. I didn't think about that.
Oh my God, it's happening.
Shit.
But and like, of course, I'm saying this as a person who's not religious, but maybe if I was, I wouldn't know the difference, and I would still just be like, nope. I don't know. Like, I can place myself in their shoes, but they can't place themselves in my shoes.
Yeah.
And it's really unfortunate because I think you'd like a lot more art if you could do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, most Christian media does suck. I still like some music. I still I don't follow them currently, but like I haven't kept up with them since my childhood, but I have some like songs on my rotation from like Christian bands that I listened to in the 90s and like early 2000s or whatever.
On my music podcast, when I was still doing it regularly, we got Andrew Horowitz from Tally Hall on there. And the album that he brought in was Jars of Clay.
Oh yeah. Yep, they were pretty big at the time. Yeah.
And the album that he brought in was like very like, it was kind of moody and alternative.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is like I think it was called like Much Afraid or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, Much Afraid by Jars of Clay. That was the album that he brought in. And like the song Overjoyed and like Fade to Gray, like those two songs back to back, I was like kind of taken aback because I was like, oh, this is kind of good.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just like open like G G G G C C, like like having played in praise bands like when I was in high school, the music is not particularly stimulating to play.
Yeah.
So like I do appreciate like Christian musicians that are like actually take the time to learn their instruments and are like good at it.
Yeah, no, yeah, that was a seemed like a good era of like where it felt like the mainstream influences were more like prevalent in music, where now I feel like whenever I do hear, like, for, you know, bands that I did listen to, like I would, you know, hear snippets of their song. They're like more current songs. And I mean, a lot of bands fall off, to be fair. Maybe it's not a sign of the times or whatever, but they do sound like that generic bullshit, you know, just trash stuff. But yeah, there's a lot of like DC Talk was my main.
United.
Yeah.
It's like all that. Ugh.
Yeah. Yeah, my first concert I went to when I was like 6 years old. It was DC Talk and Newsboys. And they were two of the big ones. Yeah. I saw Audio Adrenaline too. I don't think that was the same show though, but they're another Christian band.
Who was in Audio Adrenaline?
Oh, I don't know. I could tell you a couple of the guys I can almost name all the guys. No, I think I know all the guys in DC Talk, but I don't know anybody out of any of the other ones. It's not.
Maybe I'm thinking of
Audio Slave.
That's what I'm thinking of.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I didn't know Audio Slave was a Christian band.
Yeah, no. Yeah, none of these names sound familiar to me. Holy shit, they've gone through a lot of members. Damn. They are not currently active. They kind of went in and out. But oh yeah, before we kind of got off in that, I was gonna say that kind of the way that like I like to look at it now, or like the way that like I can like enjoy it more is kind of stripping it from the Christian text, because then I think I do get too much of like, well, I don't like that, because I have so many quibbles with like how God works, because I think he's a vain, vindictive like monster pretty much. And it's like your son has to die. You give him these human feelings and everything, but you're making him die and suffer on the cross because you said so. Like, here's the thing that Christians don't like to address is like, he didn't have to do that. God makes the rules, right? He didn't have to do that. He didn't have to do the stuff like this. He could have just made it happen. He could have just been like, yeah, you guys are saved. Now I don't have to send my son to suffer and be tortured. But I guess he felt like it, because, you know, he's got to.
They wouldn't appreciate it enough.
I guess so. Yeah.
We got to throw in some bloodshed there to really put the fear in them.
Yeah. So
like if you don't accept me, and if you don't, you know, follow me, this is what'll happen to you.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, he doesn't have to, you know, but.
Because like, dude, you know, Old Testament God was
he's a fucking bitch. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like a pussy.
It's
I mean,
like, dude, it's like you ate a fig on Friday.
Yeah.
You piece of shit.
Yeah.
And then it's just like his entire family bloodline is just dead, like right there, over something super arbitrary, over just like, hey, well, you weren't supposed to tie your shoelaces on Saturdays, so your daughters are gonna just be trafficked and like just brutally sodomized. And it's like, hey, what's the lesson to learn there?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, really. Yeah. So I was saying, like, I got to kind of strip it of like thinking of like the greater context of Christianity, and just be like, I like the movie as a character study of this, this, you know, this guy named Jesus in a, you know, this like fictional story. This is just a fictional, you know, kind of movie that tells a story. I also kind of like interpreting it somewhat, although I mean, it's not, this is not a solid theory, because you do see him perform miracles and stuff, but like the first like chunk, he almost just seems like he's like schizophrenic or something like that. You know, the way that he's like writhing on the ground and like screaming out to God, and like he's not, there's nothing like special about him at that point. He's just kind of a guy who thinks he's like, I'm hearing voices. Like he's literally saying that. And like, you know, nowadays you don't think that somebody is like the Messiah if you hear somebody say that.
Yeah, you're not like on the bus and there's a guy writhing around talking about hearing voices and you're like, we should hear this guy out.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But then I'm thinking like at the end, I'm like, but what if it was just that he was just a severely mentally ill guy, and then that's like him just dying, because then that music comes in, that like the really like high fast like horns that like I think that's what it's like, and it doesn't sound like joyous. It doesn't sound triumphant.
Yeah.
It sounds like scary, which makes me, which to me, that makes the ending feel like kind of like muddy, like a little. It makes it feel a little like weird. It doesn't feel like, yay, it's done. Yay, it's, he did the thing. And
because I think usually with like the movies that tell the story of Jesus, I feel like they really try to hammer home the part where they rolled the stone away 3 days later and he's not there, and then he shows up and he's got the holes in his hands and he's good as new, and he's like, yep, I told you I was coming back. I'm here. You're all saved. Everyone who believes in me will be saved. And then he goes off to heaven, right? Like, I feel like they really hammer that stuff in. This movie doesn't show that. This movie, like he says it is accomplished and then dies on the cross, and like that's it. So it's like, I don't know, you could even interpret it that way, that is like, we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know.
I like it being like an option,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like it certainly doesn't feel particularly, like triumphant, like yay, like I'm happy that this happened to this guy. Because like he was kind of in agonizing pain about it the entire movie.
Right.
And then he was in agonizing pain until he died.
Yeah.
And then the movie ended.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, because he even says that when he's in the vision, or whatever you want, when he's living his life, like later when he's getting old and stuff, he even says like that his whole, like he hadn't like felt joy or freedom until then, like up until, to him he was saying like up until he got off the cross he was like living for someone. I don't remember how he phrases it, but he's basically saying like, I was never happy because I was like living for something else, or I was trying to be something else, but now I am happy.
Yeah.
And, so really he was just
what a huge bummer that's like the moral of the story, is that like he couldn't have that.
Yeah.
And in fact was not supposed to have that.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, in a way it's kind of like he did,
Yeah.
Because to him he got to live all those years or whatever. I don't know how long. I mean, he was probably like 40. That's how much time had passed.
Yeah, Mary Magdalene died real fast.
Yeah, she did.
The only other thing I had was that like I watched some of the behind the scenes stuff on the Criterion, and it was really odd seeing like people in plain clothes walking around with like all of the actors. But what was really funny and adorable about it was that all the behind the scenes shit was from Martin Scorsese's, like he had like a VHS like camcorder, and there were a few times where he like kind of clumsily turned it around, so he kind of had like the boomer Facebook photo angle. Yeah. And he's just like talking about the production stuff for like that day, and just like, but I was like, oh, this is just my dad. Because he's like walking around, and he's like, oh yeah, there's Willem's trailer. Oh, there's Harvey's trailer. He's like, oh, there's Harvey Keitel, and he like zooms in on him, and Harvey's just like doing like one of these kind of things. And then there was like a little bit behind the scenes of the baptism scene in the river, and like you kind of see all the extras like standing around. And I was like, oh, this is like the magic of movie making, is standing around and waiting for a scene to start. Standing around for like 16 hours a day for like 2 minutes of filming or whatever. I don't know. I've never been on a set. You would know more about that than I do. But
that's pretty accurate.
there was like this great
Maybe
part
5
where it was like
minutes.
obviously the the cinematographer, like they had like a big track in the little river, and so like I think you get kind of like that dolly shot of like all of the dancers and shit. And there's like this really funny moment where Martin's like kind of filming everyone else, and then he gets over to Harvey Keitel, and Harvey's just like, hey Marty, the camera's down there. Do you want to go operate it? Do you want to use like kind of just be like, why are you doing this on the set? Shouldn't you be working? And Martin's just like walking around, like zooming in, like, oh, hey, here's Willem Dafoe. Like, what's he doing? Let's follow him around. It was really cute. It was really funny. Like he's a funny guy.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Funny how I make you laugh. It's just it's funny that people only think of Martin Scorsese as like the gangster guy because of like Goodfellas and Casino and The Departed, which are like, yeah, like some of his biggest movies, but it's like you get character explorations like this, and it's
Aviator,
just like, yeah,
like that.
yeah, he's such a competent director. I mean, he's good at doing the gangster stuff.
Yeah,
like I love The Departed. I love Goodfellas. I haven't seen Casino yet, but like,
I haven't seen that one.
Those are really good movies, but like he's extremely versatile doing other stuff.
Oh yeah,
And this is like, yeah.
Yeah. I concur. Pretty good.
All right, who goes first here?
I guess you start us off.
No, sure.
This week.
Yeah. I think I'm sitting at like a pretty solid 8 for this one. I wasn't sure going into it. I was kind of like, I'm like, because I've heard a lot about this movie. I've heard a lot of people say it's like really great, and I was like kind of going into it just like, I don't know. Sometimes like you hear about a movie and like how great it is, and you go to watch it, and you're like, I don't know, it didn't really do much for me. But I think that and our conversation has kind of like steered me that way. Yeah, I do like it quite a bit. I like the character study of Jesus almost from like, not even like a secular point of view, but just from a point of view that's more neutral than just like dogmatic, like a very brutal retelling of like the story of Jesus. And it's just like, and if you don't believe this, you're going to hell.
Yeah.
Like the character study aspect and like the humanization, I think is like a really interesting lens to look at the story. And I think more or less it's like executed very well. The budget apparently was like really low. Like it went from like a $14 million budget to even less just because of all of like the threats from like the religious organizations that like the studios kind of caved in.
Fucking crazy.
And it's yeah,
so
it's
stupid.
I mean the pendulum swinging back that way, baby. But it is wild to think about for a movie that's as tame as this is. Doesn't even really have any swears in it. There's like no foul language. You just see boobies, and like that's really it.
I mean,
like
if
a
we're
sex
going like
scene, I
a
guess.
MPAA rating, I mean, there's like blood. I don't know if I guess you could maybe that just
there's like violence.
Yeah,
I guess,
there's some violence,
but it's like it's still pretty tame.
Yeah.
But yeah, great Paul Schrader movie, great Martin Scorsese movie, great Willem Dafoe movie. I'm sad we didn't get to see his huge ass dong.
Yeah.
Like you kind of saw, kind of like when he's on the cross, and I saw his legs twisted to the side. I'm like, give it to us. What are you doing? Come on.
I know. I was like, why do they have him like folded in that weird position? I was like, it's because they don't want to film his dick. Whatever.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nevertheless,
I'm also at an 8. I was thinking like in my memory, I was like, this is like a strong 8. But now it's like rewatching it and like again that middle chunk not being as compelling to me. Like it's like a lighter 8 now, but it's still an 8. Yeah, like we said, I like the exploration of his character. I think the performances are good. I think there's a lot of that great classic Scorsese filmmaking stuff in it. And I like when Jesus has sex, and I like when he sings. And
That's just like me.
Yeah. Every time I think about this movie, I get more angry at dumb, like, Christians being dumb about stuff.
Maybe they were on edge because like Life of Brian also was like around the same time.
True.
And that one,
I did think about that a couple times while watching this.
But like one of my favorite things in the world is, I think on either Letterman or one of those late night shows, they had like John Cleese and Michael Palin on, and I think they had like a couple like cardinals from the Catholic Church or whoever to like, I guess, debate the merits of like the story or to like, you know, kind of like, hey, you don't like this, you made this thing, let's have a conversation about it. And one of my favorite things is like during one of those interviews, like, even though those two religious guys were there like as people that wanted this film banned, like they could not help but laugh at the jokes that John Cleese and Michael Palin made. like it's like you can't resist it. They're just so effortlessly like charming and funny that even like these like papal people or whatever that were there to like try to ban the movie, we're still like giggling at like the silly things that you said.
Nice. That's cool. Yeah. And I feel like nowadays you just don't get that because it's like we're so like people are just becoming less and less like charitable, or it's like if you know, relate at all to the other side, it's like you've lost, or you're like, you know,
it's like a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
I think they're just incurious. They're incurious about like the world and like, I guess, other people's perspectives. And I'm not saying that from like a, like, you need to understand my perspective. And it's like Elon was just autistic. He wasn't Sig Heiling. Like, I don't need to understand your perspective because you're full of shit. But just like a kind of a fundamental incuriosity about like other cultures, other beliefs, other thought processes, where it's like you guys could probably find a lot of common ground if you like were willing to do that. I mean, this is a movie that I watched as a non-religious person that I was like kind of moved by in some ways, you know, and it's like I can find things there whether I like fundamentally like believe them or not, you know.
Yeah. I don't really have anything to add to it. Praise be on high. I don't know.
I saw a new thing this month. I guess it was like 2 weeks ago at time of recording. I saw Companion, the new movie with Jack Quaid and, man, I don't remember her name.
I cannot. Yeah. She was in that Heretic movie too.
Sophie Thatcher.
That's it. Yeah.
So this, I initially saw the preview for Companion. I want to say it was a trailer before, maybe when I went to go see Seven in IMAX. But it looked interesting. It was like, it was one of those like from the producers who brought you this thing, and it was Barbarian, and so that's kind of what piqued my interest because it was like produced by Zach Kreger or whatever. Didn't know too much going into it. And I was very, very pleasantly surprised. I think, do you know much about this movie at all?
I seen the trailer where she's like a robot or something.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, okay. She's
like Companion is the name of the movie. She's kind of like a
girlfriend,
like a it's one of those movies that like obviously takes place in the future, but it doesn't feel like, whoa, we're in the future.
Almost like Black Mirror-y, kind of like some sci-fi tech stuff, but it still feels like modern.
It's like sci-fi tech that is like integrated into like life seamlessly to the point where like it's I feel like it's like kind of how it would be if it were integrated in real life, where it's just like, yeah, these things are changed, but otherwise like life still goes on in the same way. Yeah, it kind of has, I don't know, it kind of has like a similar, I don't know about like structure to Barbarian. Like it doesn't have like the like decades time skips, I will say that, but it does have like the first act, you think it's going to be this kind of movie, then the second act it's this kind of movie, and then the third act it's like, I guess the second and third act are a little more similar than the first two, but it's kind of
that's very Barbarian. It's mostly the first act.
Yeah,
it's like really different.
Yeah. But man, with the discussion of like AI and where AI fits into our lives and like the way that everything seems to be going towards that, I think this movie does a really good job of like, I don't know, not like being like a doomer about AI, but also like not saying like it's the future. I don't know what I'm trying to say. It misses a lot of like common pratfalls that I think you could by like referencing maybe like current day AI things. Like it doesn't feel like a commercial for AI, but it also isn't like sympathetic in the sense that it's just like, you better get used to it because it's happening now. Like I don't know, it's kind of like Ex Machina. Okay. Where it just kind of tells a story and like this is a thing in it and like do with it what you will. Yeah, Jack Quaid is great. Harvey Guillen is in it, who I know from the What We Do in the Shadows TV show. Yeah.
He's Perito in Puss in Boots too.
That's right. Because every time like Harvey Guillen was talking in this movie, I was like, oh shit, it's the dog from Puss in Boots. Like I can't not hear that in his voice. Especially like there's a scene with him and like another character where he's like, you're important to me and I love you, and I'm like, this is the dog. This is just the dog talking, you know? Jabuki is in it. He's like a guy that I know from Twitter.
Jabuki.
But he's like Jabuki Young White. He's mostly a comedian that I feel like has like slowly started to like make his way into TV shows and stuff. He was in an episode of Black Mirror from 2023. He was in the Joan is Awful episode. Apparently.
Oh, okay. I mean, I saw that.
Yeah. But the thing that I know the most about Jabuki is it's one of my favorite stories of all time. Before Elon bought Twitter, like the verification, he was like verified, but like the verification process was like you had to be a prominent or notable person, and so it's like he was a comedian, he was like an actor, you know, he was in like these TV shows, so he was like verified. And there were certain things that like if you broke certain terms of service, like you could lose your verification. And
wait, maybe I've heard about this.
He lost his verification because he changed his Twitter name and his profile picture to CNN Breaking News.
Oh, okay.
And he tweeted, "Breaking, Joe Biden is not dead. He just getting some dick. We've all been there." CNN.com. He lost his Twitter verification because he awesome. So that's like my favorite thing about Jabuki. There was like another comedian, I think it's Brandon Wardell, who like changed his name to Joe Biden and changed his profile picture to like the presidential portrait. And just tweeted like, "I'm dead." And like he got suspended for like a week too. 2020 was wild. But anyway, yeah, Jabuki was in this. But yeah, I think it could have been like a really annoying, shitty, just like run-of-the-mill Blumhouse horror movie about an AI robot, and it could have like done all these dumb bullshit predictable things, and this movie like pleasantly surprised me. I mean, that's not to say that there weren't, like
stuff like
predictable horror movie tropes where it's like, oh, they introduced this thing early on, it'll probably come back into play later. Like, they still had like elements of that because it's still kind of like a popcorn movie, I guess. Mm-hmm. But it was smart. It was smarter than like your average like dumb Blumhouse horror movie.
Cool.
So that's a recommend from me.
Nice.
Oh, also the guy from The White Lotus is in it. The first season, the guy that was eating out the guy's ass.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Lucas Gage.
Yeah.
I was like, where have I seen him before? And Chloe was like, yeah, he's the dude from The White Lotus. It's like, oh, he's the guy that was like rimming Armand.
Yeah. Yeah, nice. Yeah, I do want to see that one.
Oh, Jack Quaid. Jack Quaid is also like so good at playing. Well, this isn't like a spoiler, but he's good at playing like affable bad guys. I'll just say that. He's not the protagonist of this movie.
Right. Yeah, I mean, at least from the trailer, it seems like he's at least, yeah. That's not that surprising, I guess, that he's not the protagonist.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I finished a show called Scavengers Reign that I think, I don't even know if I remember when it coming out. It was just kind of like, it was one of those that, I don't know, I don't think it has a ton of people saw it, and I was one of those where just like, I just kind of like skipped it. It just kind of looked like a whatever show, but then I just kept hearing like nothing but amazing things about it, and I ended up really, really, really liking it. It's an animated show. I think it's American. No, I think so. Or well, it's English at least. But it's set on this alien planet. These people were on like a colony ship or something like that, and they crash land. You don't know why. I think the first episode starts and they're just like on the planet, and you kind of like, you get like flashbacks, and it kind of like fills you in parts. And it follows like, I'm trying to think how many groups there are. There's like a guy on his own. There's a guy and a girl together. There's a girl and a robot. And it might just be those three groups. But they're all like separated. Like they all took escape pods and they crash landed in different spots of the planet. And they're all trying to, but they have like a beacon or whatever that will like, so they're all heading back to the main ship so that they can like repair it or whatever, and like take a ship, take it off planet or whatever, get off the planet.
Yeah.
But the planet is like incredibly like dangerous. And it's very cool how it like, and like my favorite thing about the show, and I think the reason a lot of people like it is like the setting and the world building and how kind of like kind of real it makes everything feel. Like it there's, I don't know how to explain it without like it, like you actually like seeing it, but there's so many things where you'll see like it's so creative with like the life, like the animals and the plants that you see and like what happens. You'll see there's so many like sequences of just like dialogue free, like we're just going to show you the sort of like predator prey relationship between these two species. And then that's it. And then you'll never see him again. But that's just, we're just kind of showing. And it's so cool and creative and with all that stuff that just is, it's some of the most impressive like world building I've seen in a while. Like there's this one sequence that is especially cool, where it's like one of the characters, she like leans down and she looks at this like plant, this like flower that's kind of blooming. And then she watches basically like the life and death cycle of this plant and like the seed bud, like in a few minutes. And that's just one of those where there's like no dialogue. You just get some music and then you see this thing like happening. And, it's really neat. It's really neat. All the stuff that it does. It's very like brutal too. There's some like body horror aspects to it. Like there's some like people will get something. They'll like grab a branch and they'll prick their finger or something. Like this doesn't exactly happen, but kind of like along those lines of like they might touch the wrong thing or something, and then it's like a small domino that just sets off a series of events where it's just like your fate is sealed almost. Yeah, there's one character in particular where that happens to them in particular, and yeah, it can be just like very brutal and pretty like horrifying with like the stuff that it shows, to where like it took me a little while to finish because it took me a little while to finish because like I would kind of have to amp myself up to watch another episode, because it wasn't even like a main character would be dying, but it's like there's so many like shocking abrupt things where again you'll just see some animals, some wildlife, and then something horrible will happen to them because I guess that's what nature is like sometimes. But then also yes, because of the characters, because in a lot of their cases you're watching it and you're like, it's not going to end well for at least some of these people. And you kind of know that it's going down and down, and then it does, and it's great. It's really, really cool, like really great high sci-fi, but it's also it's intense. It gets really intense at parts. And yeah, I don't know if it's gonna be, there's a lot of people like really are trying to push for a second season, but I think it was one of those where seems like it was mainly or mostly self-funded by the creator. I did look it up, and it looks like it got canceled in May of 2024 by HBO after the first season. So, and then now it's on Netflix, and I guess that was the idea, is he's trying to get Netflix to pick it up. Just be like, hey, look, people are watching it here. Right. Give us another season. But I don't think they're picking it up either. But he actually just recently, like within the last couple weeks, the guy, look at his name. What's his name? Joseph. Yeah, was it him or is it? Well, it's two. I don't remember which one it was who actually posted the thing. The creators are Joseph Bennett and Charles Hutner. But one of those guys on their YouTube channel, they posted like a season 2 trailer where they like fully animated like a 2-3 minute trailer, but it's not. That's cool. It still hasn't been picked up, but it's kind of just like they're still like really trying to like generate interest for it and stuff. It's something that they want to continue on. And it's really unfortunate that interesting and unique shows like this have to sing for their supper, but there's like so many just generic shows that get greenlit and get multiple seasons that are just like, I don't know. I was talking to one of my coworkers today about this, because we were like talking about Severance and like the new season, and one of our coworkers, who is like a nice enough person, is definitely the type of like person who's like, oh, I couldn't get into that show because it was like too slow. And it's like, yes, because you were like looking at your phone. You're like distracted. You're not like paying attention to it. And so it's like the only types of shows these days that get greenlit now are shows that are like, that have distracted audiences in mind. So then a show like this, where there's like moments of like total silence, or like there's no dialogue-less moments, where
I could see people watching this and being like, nothing happened. Like nothing happened. There's no plot. What's the plot? The plot is like an animal got eaten by another animal. What is that? And it's like this very like, again, incurious way of engaging with art that bums me out a lot.
Bring it back, yeah.
Because like I remember when I was a kid, I really liked Samurai Jack.
Oh yeah,
and there were a handful of episodes of Samurai Jack where there may have been like 2 sentences total of dialogue, and the rest of it is like purely like environmental storytelling where like you have to pay attention to like it'll be like an animal that he runs into or like bugs or some sort of like he meets like an automaton that doesn't speak but just like basically like they can only communicate physically or whatever. And it's like those are some of my favorite episodes of that show. And it's just like it sucks that there's not like it's like outsider auteur shit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
I like the art style too. I'm like looking at like pictures of it, and the art style looks really cool.
Yeah, it is, and like especially when it gets into like the really creative aspect of like what you're seeing, and just like even when it doesn't like focus, like it's not just when you get like, you know, oh, here's a segment where we're going to show this thing. It's just like you'll get in the background of like, you know, the characters talking and doing stuff and, you know, progressing the story and all that. But like you can see like in the background or like as they're traveling and walking, these like ecosystems of like how all these different plants and animals like interact, and like it doesn't necessarily focus on it. It can just be in the background. Sometimes it is more focused on. And it's so cool to see. Like it's very, I don't know. It's just incredibly impressive how like real they make all this stuff feel. And it doesn't feel like, I also appreciate a good sci-fi thing where it's like, it's not like, I mean, hey, I like Star Wars, but it's not like, oh, here's Tatooine. It's the desert planet, and it's a desert, and there's these animals called banthas that are kind of just like hairy elephants. It's like this feels very unique. It doesn't just feel like, oh, it's a forest planet, and there's these animals that, you know, that's basically a dog, but it's got like a horn or something like that. It's everything feels very, you know, of its own and all that.
It's not just an analog of something we have on Earth, but like, exactly, he's got an extra set of arms and it's like tentacles or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like how, you know, most like aliens with like, you know, are humanoid. They have like 2 arms and 2 legs, and they, you know, it'd be more like the, you know, like another good example of that is like Arrival, like how the aliens are these weird, almost like incomprehensible, like octopus thingies. It's like, yeah, that feels more like how it would be if we encountered aliens. And
yeah, like how would we know, you know?
Yeah.
Our perception is really only like what we're limited to and like our imagination. So it's just like, oh, well, if there's aliens, they'd probably be like us. So they'd like have 2 legs and 2 arms and have a head, and you know,
which again
the gray man
is very Star Warsy and Mass Effect-y and stuff.
yeah.
They're a person but blue or something. So yeah, just a really cool show. It would be cool if it got another season. It's again another pro is that it's half-hour episodes. It's 12 episodes, so you know it's not that long to get through. But yeah, if you're like me, it might take you a little long because of how kind of stressful it is to watch.
Yeah.
There's also this little guy called Hollow that turns out to be like the main antagonist, but he starts out as just this little, it's an alien, this little guy, and I'm like, oh man, he's so cute, and then he just gets bigger and fatter, and I'm like, he's still cute, but then he's like the bad guy. And I was like, oh no, I don't like where this is going. That might have also factored into it because I'm like, he's so evil, but he's so cute, and I'm like, I still don't want him to die.
Yeah,
and I don't know. I won't say too much more, but like, I guess I'm mostly happy with how they end it. I mean, like overall, like I really am cool with how it ends. It's nice because it doesn't like fully set it up for. It's not like on a cliffhanger where it's like God, you need to know what's gonna happen next. But it's like it definitely sets up a future season, but it's also like, it would be okay if there wasn't anything, but it wouldn't.
Yeah,
I do want more. There's a lot of times, like, I started it and Clea wasn't watching it, but then like I kind of like was purposely watching it when she was around because there was a lot of like cute animals in it. But then I was like, every time one would show up, I'm like, I'd be like, kind of like gritting my teeth because I'm like, oh shit, is this one gonna die? Is this one gonna get like eviscerated? And it's like a coin flip whether it's gonna happen or not.
Yeah.
So our next episode is, I'm trying to think. So the next episode will be, it would be this one is where we would do it. That would make the most sense. Is like around St. Patrick's Day. And apparently I told Kalia that we would watch this movie for the show.
Okay.
She brought up the movie and I thought she was talking about something else. Okay. So I'm like, she might be gaslighting me, but if that sounds all right to you, it's gonna be a movie kind of for St. Patrick's Day, I guess.
Okay.
So, it's in all caps. Oh, okay. So we'll be watching a movie from 1998 directed by Kirk Jones, Waking Ned Devine. Heard of it?
Okay.
I've seen it once before with her. It's, I don't know, she just really likes it. Probably because it's got a bunch of like silly old men in it.
What's it called?
Waking Ned Devine.
Oh.
Although when I Google it, it just says Waking Ned, but it's Waking Ned Devine.
Waking Ned Devine in North America. Okay.
Oh, okay. It's just Waking Ned in Ireland. Yeah, that's right. I knew there was somebody in it that I knew. It's got Finola Flanagan, but it's got the dad, or not the dad, the grandpa from the Tim Burton, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah.
But okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll be watching that for the next episode. Watch it before then if you don't want to be spoiled for it. These episodes come out on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. EST, and on YouTube in video form, as well as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more in audio form. We also have social pages on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And with all that said, I am your big dick messiah, DJ. And with me as always.
As always, it is accomplished.
Oh, nice.
Okay. And I am Nick. And that's probably blasphemous that I just did that.
I call myself the Messiah. I don't know if that's, they probably...
To quote the Cat in the Hat, Judas Priest.
Yeah, I almost thought that you were going to say that one.